What is going on, everybody? Travis Fowler Harkrider is back once again with another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles, and you know what that means. It's time to talk pro wrestling. But before we go further into the wrestling world, there is huge breaking news coming out of yesterday and San Diego's Comic-Con. Perhaps the biggest heel turn in the entertainment industry. If you don't know what I'm referring to because you've been under a rock for the last 24 hours, well, here's a clip. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Robert Downey Jr. has returned to the Marvel Cinematic Universe, only this time he has taken up a new mask, a new Iron Mask of sorts, if you will, that being the one of Doctor Doom. That's right, he is going to be portraying Doctor Doom in the next Avengers movie, appropriately titled Avengers Doomsday, set for release in May of 2026. I personally have not caught up yet on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I haven't seen Infinity War or Endgame. Obviously, those both have come out years ago, so I already know what happens. But I still want to watch them because I do want to see how they pull this off with Avengers Doomsday. And I think it's great that they've got him to come back. Some people are a little confused as to how this is going to work. But for comic book fans, I've already seen a lot of people talk about the multi-universe and how Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man can easily fit into this fold as Doctor Doom, because apparently there is a story where Iron Man becomes infamous Iron Man, as I've seen one comic book cover show, where he does take on the mantle of Doctor Doom. So it's going to be very intriguing how this is all pulled off, and I know a lot of people are excited about it. I personally like Robert Downey Jr. as an actor, and I thought he was a great Tony Stark and Iron Man from the first film, and he's just been excellent through all of the Marvel movies with Iron Man. So it's going to be really fun to see him go from being the absolute hero of the Avengers to now becoming their number one nemesis. So Avengers Doomsday comes out again May 2026, but enough of the entertainment industry in that form, because unless it's John Cena turning heel, we don't need to talk much about heel turns outside of that. So let's get back into our wrestling world, because we've got SummerSlam coming up this upcoming weekend. We've had a lot of interesting news take place over the last week. So let's just jump right into it. And I'm going to start off with AEW and Ring of Honor for that matter. AEW has taken the Collision show and they've pretty much put it in a center location for at least the next few shows. They've been there now, I think, 2 weeks, and I think they've got 2 more weeks that they're looking to fill. They've been down in the Arlington area, and I believe the arena is about a 1,500-seat arena, something to that effect. But they've done 2 collisions now. They've done a Battle of the Belts there. They did the Ring of Honor shows this past week. Both Death Before Dishonor as well as the weekly show have all been taped there. And honestly, I like the more intimate setting for ROH and AEW, even if it's just for the one show called Collision. But I think this is a right move. I think AEW needs to focus more on some of these more intimate arenas. Mainly because it is becoming difficult for them to sell those 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 seat arenas. And that's not me trying to begrudge them, nor is it me talking down to them. It just seems like that they were able to pack an arena, a smaller venue, with a lot of passionate fans that were really into the product, and it's paid off. I know with ROH, they had a successful Death Before Dishonor event. I personally did not see it. And I'll be quite honest, I probably won't watch it either, just because ROH hasn't really done anything to gain my interest, but I do still try to at least keep up with some of the results. There's been quite a few title changes within ROH from Death Before Dishonor, as well as Collision, just about 12 hours ago or so. We're recording this Sunday morning. Collision was last night on Saturday, and it crowned actually at Battle of the Belts, new Ring of Honor six-man tag team champions in the form of the Natural Dustin Rhodes and the Von Erich boys with their father Kevin at their side. So two legendary families from the state of Texas in professional wrestling, the Rhodes and the Von Erichs, have come together and hold the ROH six-man tag titles. So that's a fun moment, especially if you've been a fan of Texas wrestling from even back in the World Class Championship Wrestling days, the Von Erichs home promotion, and then of course Dusty Rhodes being the son of a plumber from Texas, Dustin Rhodes being from that state as well. There's a lot of history there. So to have that history paid off with this title reign, no matter how long it goes, it just is a nice little nod to the state of Texas and professional wrestling in the state of Texas. But I got to talk a little bit about something that was said during the post-scrum interviews with Tony Khan at ROH's Death Before Dishonor. Someone had brought up the mention of ROH not getting, I guess, enough notoriety or something to that effect. And when Tony Khan talked about how they would want to bring more eyes and visibility to the Ring of Honor product, he made a suggestion of potentially renaming ROH as AEW ROH. So essentially doing what WWE did with ECW. And that's where you get the WWE CW jokes from and everything of that sort. That's what he's looking to potentially do, or I guess as he said, quote, not completely out of the question to rebrand ROH in that form. I'm just going to speak for myself in it's just my own opinion. I personally would hate to see that take place because ROH had such a great lineage. And as we talked about last week, the former owner of Ring of Honor was very high hope touching when Ring of Honor was purchased by Tony Khan, even as far as to say that he felt like the company was in good hands once Mr. Khan purchased the company. Now fast forward from that time to today, and even he said, Ring of Honor is unrecognizable now. Nobody's really talking about them, and that's unfortunately true. And I understand where Tony's coming from, where he thinks that since AEW is the main brand, that rebranding it as AEW presents ROH or AEW Ring of Honor, whatever you want to refer to it as, maybe that would help. But I don't think so, because now you're opening yourself up to the WWE ECW tropes. And we know how that ended up with ECW. It didn't do anything to build upon the ECW legacy because they simply couldn't. Now, maybe AEW would have a different outcome with that if that were to take place, since they do have similar presentations with All Elite Wrestling and Ring of Honor from back in the day. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad. But I really do think that it would be a misstep. And I think if you want to bring the notoriety back to Ring of Honor, the first step is to treat it like its own separate brand as opposed to trying to merge them like he had been doing. I think that's kind of maybe one reason I was in support of them splitting up the unified six-man tag titles, which we now see ROH has crowned new champions there, so I only wonder who's going to take the AEW six-man tag titles. Actually, I don't have to wonder, because they solved that last week on Collision when the Patriarchy took those titles. So you can clearly see that there is a division between those titles. Don't know why you unified them in the first place. So in my opinion, you need to keep them separate like that. Keep the rosters separate. But unfortunately, I think we can all agree that that's probably not going to happen, even though that would be the best route to take for Ring of Honor. But maybe it'll work if it does take place. Only time will tell if we even do see that come to fruition. Again, my own personal take, I hope that doesn't happen, but I've been wrong before, so it's not like it ain't going to happen again at some point. This might be where it's proven me wrong again. So we'll see what happens with Ring of Honor, and hopefully one day we can be talking about it back in its prestigious limelight once again. But while we're still on the AEW topic, let's talk about Blood and Guts from this past week. Overall, the show it really didn't do much for me. Aside from a couple of segments and then the Blood and Guts match itself, I really wasn't a big fan overall of the Blood and Guts match, maybe because out of all of them that have been had thus far, this would be the one where I think I was the least excited for it because the story itself just seems like a complete mess. You know, I understand what they were trying to do, I just don't think it was done successfully. But again, that's just my own opinion of it. Starting off, the whole Blood and Guts show to begin with was MJF rechristening the once international title to the American title. And of course, that's just a straight dig for Will Ospreay being former champion. We also now have gotten the rematch announced, and I am very happy to say that it is going to take place at All In. MJF, Will Ospreay 2 for the currently named American Championship. Probably going to go back to International Championship when the match is all said and done. These two obviously pulled out a barnstormer on their first meeting. I look forward to seeing what they do with part 2. Another thing that's very intriguing is we saw the women's division have a couple of high spotlights this past week. The aftermath of the Britt Baker Hikaru Shida match saw Mercedes Moné come out, and we got introduced to her enforcer, the Diesel to her Shawn Michaels. The finally debuting Camille has shown up in AEW after months of being signed to the promotion and not being featured at all. Mercedes Moné now has some backup, her own insurance policy in the form of Camille, and she is a monster of a human being. We've already seen her and Mercedes at San Diego Comic-Con where the All-In match was announced and a little bit of a confrontation took place between Moné and Baker. Of course, Moné came out being a comic book and anime nerd that she is, dressed as Poison Ivy with the Dark Knight version of Camille's Bane being right by her side. I thought that was a cool visual, honestly, and a cool throwback to the Batman and Robin movie as well, which I grew up with that movie. It's as cheesy as could be with all of its one-liner and puns, especially with Arnold Schwarzenegger's Freeze, but it's still a fun movie. And to see Moné and Camille kind of pay tribute to that as well as an homage to the Poison Ivy character and then the Dark Knight version of Bane, that was really fun. Some people didn't really like how Tony announced the match. I think that's just people poking at the man. We know he's a fan, and I myself have even questioned a little bit of his fandom going overboard sometimes. But at the end of the day, it's just nice to see wrestling fans, and especially top-level execs that are still fans, have fun doing what they're doing. So we've got that match officially announced for All In. Another match that we have set after we saw Mariah May win the Owen Hart Foundation Cup on the women's side, we saw the continuation of the Toni Storm Mariah May story in a great segment that saw Mariah May come out in full heel mode and squash her victim this past week, and then the subsequent brawl between her and Toni Storm was really good. Like, this story, it has a lot of beats to it, and I think the match is going to be one that we talk about for quite a while. AEW's women's division is picking up steam again, and some would say that it's the best women's division right now in professional wrestling. I really don't know if I would say that's true, only because there has been so much talent on the WWE side of things as well. And then TNA has always been at the forefront of putting women's wrestling on a big platform and putting them center stage. And while they may not be main event level at the moment with TNA, I will say they still have a prominent feature, especially with the juggernaut Jordynne Grace being their champion. Women's wrestling is very healthy right now overall, and especially stateside, to see the growth of women's wrestling has been an absolute joy and pleasure. We've seen some amazing matches take place just within the last 10 years of the women's division having this revolution of sorts take over, whether it be with the Evolution pay-per-view, whether it be the focused attention on taking out the Divas name and just calling them wrestlers and superstars again, AEW starting to pick its momentum back up with its women's wrestling. everything's great if you're a woman in this business right now, at least when it comes to the in-ring side. I'm sure there's always going to be questionable things that take place, and hopefully we can get all those bad weeds pulled out here sooner rather than later. But overall, I love how the women's wrestling movement has taken over and is producing great stories and great matches at the same time. But one of the things that I still had a complaint about when it came towards the blood and guts match itself was an infamous spot now that took place and has had people talking all week long. The Jack Perry spot with him handcuffed to the cage and taking a straight chair shot to the head from Mark Briscoe. And man, it was impactful. And you have a lot of people calling this spot into question. Even Corey Graves himself sent out a tweet that was later deleted, and I'll throw it up on the screen right now. He was calling into question why you would even do that spot. He, like many others, believe that headshots with chairs is a thing of the past and should stay there. And as somebody who, as he points out, suffered too many concussions that ended his career, it's just unnecessary in 2024. And honestly, I kind of agree. Now, I also want to play devil's advocate too, because if you recall, AEW also did a head chair shot spot when Shawn Spears came onto the fold, and he decked Cody with that chair shot. And it was just the one chair shot. So I have myself torn because I do think that you can do risky spots in isolation. You don't have to do them so frequently, and I don't think they do. So it's hard for me to really, I guess, go in hard on AEW for doing this spot because it's not like they do it every week. So I feel like if it's done in isolation and it's something that only happens to add to a narrative or a story, fine. I don't really have too much of an issue with it. I don't see exactly where that falls into the story other than just making it a part of the match that I guess you could argue that it was just a way to keep Perry subdued, so he gave him that hard chair shot. And honestly, guys, despite what anybody wants to say, I know that there's been rumors of the chair being gimmicked and shaved down. Jimmy Corderas, a legendary referee for WWE, put out a video on his social media where he banged on a chair and he said, just so you know, this is a solid steel chair. It's not made of wood. You can't shave steel down enough because guess what? It's still steel. You can't do anything about the steel material. And so it doesn't matter even if you attempt to do that. If you're swinging a steel chair, you're going to make contact with steel. And yeah, overall, I don't think headshots should make a comeback whatsoever. But in isolation, I really don't have too much of a problem with it as long as everybody's on board. And obviously, as long as somebody doesn't get seriously hurt, which at least not trying to necessarily say this is a great thing, but the fact that Jack Perry took the chair shot right on the top of his head, right on top of the dome. Guys, just so you know, this is the safest area that you could take that shot from and not have too much to worry about, if anything to worry about. So they were playing it safe, as safely as you can, that is. So I don't think people should continue to badger AEW about that spot any more than what they already have, and especially after this week. I think it's something that we can leave back at the Blood and Guts match and just leave it alone in isolation, and everything will be just fine. While we're talking about spots that are called into question, we have to bring up CM Punk, who was notorious as part of his exit with AEW, and Jack Perry, of all people, and a glass spot, which we all know what happened there. It's now even part of his gimmick and character. But man, they even added that as a little bit of a troll when the next day a picture surfaced of Drew McIntyre meeting Jack Perry and taking a picture with him. And it had the caption, "Cry Me a River" with it. So That's something that's been so much fun to watch. This Drew McIntyre CM Punk feud has been nothing short of entertaining. Seth Rollins being added into the mix just makes it all the better. I mean, the whole story has been great from top to bottom. Both guys have been putting in the work, whether it be physical or even just verbal with their promos. It's been top notch. And it's honestly one of those matches that I have been looking forward to seeing, and we finally get it at SummerSlam with Rollins as the special referee. But since CM Punk has come back to WWE, people have just been waiting for the shoe to drop, as the saying goes, and reports surface of some backstage attitude problems and so forth. None of that has been existent since CM Punk came back to WWE. As a matter of fact, there's been nothing but glowing reviews of CM Punk and his behavior in WWE these days. I saw something just 2 days ago where basically they listed him as like a model citizen now. All the previous issues that he used to have with backstage attitude problems and difficulty to work with, none of that has been the case. It's even been reported that Punk and McIntyre have been very cordial with each other. They have actually talked with each other on how to build their feud. Again, this is just what's being reported, whether true or not, I don't know. It's just what they're putting out there. But I assume that both men have been very good about telling each other, hey, let's do this, let's do that, because it seems like it's been working. It's made this feud so enjoyable. Honestly, you could argue that it's the top feud on Raw right now. At least in my mind, you could say that. But this all comes now to CM Punk apparently restructuring his contract because things have been going so well. It's been reported that it was on a short-term basis in the beginning, and now he wants to restructure it and get to a point where in the contract, he's even stated to people that he wants to remain with WWE, quote, forever. As soon as he thinks he's done with his in-ring career, he wants to wrap that up and move into somewhat of a producer's role. This is all great stuff. Like, who would have thought 10 years ago that we would even have CM Punk in WWE after the walkout in January of 2014? Here we are now in July, almost August of 2024, and to hear reports of CM Punk being a good guy and a model citizen and being great to work with in WWE nonetheless is something I honestly didn't think we would ever see again. I'm glad that we are. I think he's fit perfect into the WWE fold again, and I very much am looking forward to seeing more of CM Punk in the future and can't wait to see other stories he'll get to tell being back in WWE. One of those stories that has been going on right now involves him, and as part of the SummerSlam card, as we mentioned, coming up this weekend, CM Punk and Drew McIntyre with Seth Rollins as a special referee is a great grudge match and is the only match on the SummerSlam card that is not for a title. But we have 6 singles titles on the line at SummerSlam. We've got both world titles on the line, both women's world titles on the line, and our 2 mid-card titles are on the line. We've got LA Knight and Logan Paul for the US title, Braun Breaker and Sami Zayn Part 2 for the Intercontinental title, Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley in a great grudge/title match for the women's world title. You've got Bayley and Nia Jax for the women's championship on the SmackDown side. And by the way, if you're not looking forward to that match, I encourage you to go back and watch their NXT match from NXT TakeOver London, I believe, is where they first met for the NXT Women's title. That match, if it's any indication as to what we get with these two now, especially since Nia Jax has been back, she has been on her A game. I am speaking as somebody who was not a Nia Jax fan. I have been highly impressed with how much better she's been since she's been back. And I actually think this can be a great match for both of them. Both have been great workers, and I think they'll pull out something that not a lot of us expect, and that is an excellent match between the two of them at SummerSlam. Then we move into our two world title matches. The first, we've got the World Heavyweight title, Damian Priest and Gunther going at it. Surprisingly enough, people are behind Priest as a good guy. I mean, that brawl that he and Gunther had last week, people were going crazy for Priest. I think that we're looking at Gunther, though, taking the world crown. I think that is something that's inevitable. He has been unstoppable with the exception of only a few losses in his entire WWE career. And I think this match is actually going to be very hard hitting between guys that can hit hard. We know Gunther's got the chops, but Priest is a martial artist, and I'm sure he'll have no problem kicking Gunther a time or two pretty hard to knock him out if he can. But then on the WWE title side, you've got the now new self-proclaimed tribal chief Solo Sikoa taking on the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes for the title. A lot of people think this is going to be Roman's return. We'll see if that has anything to do with the match at SummerSlam. I do think Rhodes is going to pull out a great match with Solo. Solo's been on his A game since he's become the focal point of the Bloodline 2.0. So I think this match is going to end up surprising a lot of people as well. SummerSlam, I have to admit, I don't know if I was looking forward to it or not. But now with the addition of a couple of matches, we've got 7 matches altogether for this card this upcoming weekend. And I do think we're in for a fun show. But I'll go into more predictions for SummerSlam next week. Until that time, guys, thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles. What did you think of the Blood and Guts chair shot? Were you for it or against it? And what are you looking forward to with SummerSlam coming up this weekend? Sound off in those comments down below. Make sure you are subscribed to our YouTube channel and following us on all our other social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok. Remember, we're on TikTok and we're doing great numbers over there. And I will be back next week with another edition of Tights and Turnbuckles. As always, though, until next time, continue to love pro wrestling.